Something strange is happening in hip-hop right now, and fans can feel it building like pressure before a storm. Reports are starting to surface, whispers turning into full-blown conversations online, all centered around one explosive claim that nobody saw coming. DJ Akademiks, the same voice who has been breaking down every major rap feud like it is a live event, is now being linked to what people are calling a potential leak tied to 50 Cent's rumored documentary on T.I. And suddenly, what once looked like just another back and forth between two legends is starting to feel a lot more serious. Now, let's be clear, nothing has been officially confirmed, but the internet is moving fast, and the way these reports are spreading has fans on edge. Some are saying there are files, unseen footage, and behind-the-scenes details that were never meant to reach the public. Others believe this could all be part of a bigger play, a calculated rollout designed to shake the culture and dominate headlines. Either way, the reaction has been intense, and emotions are already running high. People close to the situation have started hinting that this is not just about music anymore. What we are hearing is that if these alleged details ever come fully into the light, it could shift the entire narrative around T.I., his legacy, and even his family. And when you bring 50 Cent into the equation, a man known for turning real-life controversy into full-scale media moments, things get even more unpredictable. Fans are shocked, timelines are flooded, and the hip-hop community is watching closely as every small update fuels even bigger speculation. Is this a real leak, or just another layer of strategy in a game where perception is everything? One thing is certain, whatever is unfolding right now has the potential to change everything, and the deeper you look into it, the more complicated it becomes. The moment those reports started circulating, the entire timeline shifted from casual gossip to something that felt way more calculated. People weren't just reacting anymore, they were analyzing every move, every post, every silence. And right in the center of it all was DJ Akademiks, sitting on his stream, reading comments, pausing clips, and reacting in real time like he was watching something unfold that even he didn't fully expect. He leaned back at one point and said, "Yo, I ain't saying nothing is confirmed, but the way people are talking about this, it's not normal." And that right there set the tone. Because when someone like him starts sounding cautious instead of loud, fans notice. The chat started going crazy, messages flying in, people asking if he had seen anything directly, if he had access to something behind the scenes. He didn't give a straight answer, but his reactions were enough to make people feel like there was more happening than what was visible on the surface. At the same time, 50 Cent's social media activity started raising eyebrows. Nothing direct, nothing that you could screenshot and say this is proof, but little hints, captions that felt loaded, throwback clips, and those signature posts where he says just enough to get people talking, but not enough to get himself in trouble. Fans are shocked because this is exactly how he has moved before when something bigger was coming. Emotions ran high as people started connecting dots that may or may not even be connected. Then the conversation shifted toward T.I. and his circle. People began asking questions about how he was responding to all of this, and what made it even more intense was the fact that he wasn't addressing it directly. Instead, there were subtle messages, interviews where he spoke about loyalty, respect, and how narratives can be twisted depending on who controls the story. One clip started going viral where he said, "You gotta be careful what you entertain, because not everything that's loud is real." Fans immediately took that as a response, even though he never mentioned any names. Behind the scenes, according to what people are saying, tension started building. One insider reported to a blogger that this isn't just internet noise, there are real conversations happening. Again, nothing confirmed, but the way these statements were coming out made it feel like something was brewing quietly. The family was left divided in terms of how to react publicly. Some believed it was better to ignore everything, while others felt like silence could be seen as weakness. And then things took a turn when a clip surfaced from one of Akademiks' streams where he was reacting to what he called the alleged concept of the documentary. He kept repeating that he wasn't saying it was real, but he started breaking down what people were claiming it might include. "If this is even half true," he said, pausing for a second, "this ain't just rap beef anymore." That line alone sent shockwaves across social media. Fans started creating threads, speculating about what kind
of footage or information could even exist. Some believed it could be old interviews taken out of context. Others thought it might involve people who had never spoken publicly before. The uncertainty made it even more intense because nobody knew what to believe, but everyone felt like something serious was at stake. Meanwhile, 50 Cent continued to play his role in a way that only he can. Instead of directly addressing the rumors, he posted a short video with a caption that read, "I mind my business, but sometimes business finds me." It was vague, almost too vague, but it was enough. Fans are shocked at how quickly that one post spread, with people interpreting it in completely different ways. Some saw it as confirmation, others thought it was just trolling. On the other side, T.I.'s supporters started pushing back hard. They flooded comment sections, defending his name, calling out what they described as agenda-driven narratives. Emotions ran high as debates turned into arguments, and arguments turned into full-blown online wars. People weren't just discussing music anymore. They were questioning credibility, intentions, and loyalty. There was also growing attention on how the industry itself was reacting. A few artists dropped subtle comments, not naming anyone, but clearly referencing the situation. One rapper posted, "Y'all gotta stop turning real life into content," and that line alone sparked another wave of discussion. Fans started asking whether this was a warning, a criticism, or just a general statement. Either way, it added another layer to an already complicated situation. Akademiks came back on stream later that night, and you could tell the energy had shifted. He wasn't as playful, wasn't as loud. He said, "Look, I'm just covering what's being said. I ain't making nothing up." But even as he said that, he started breaking down the timeline of how these reports started and how quickly they escalated. He pointed out how certain details were being repeated across different platforms, almost like they were coming from the same source. Fans are shocked at how fast everything is moving. One minute, it's just a rumor. The next minute, it feels like a full-blown narrative that people are already treating as fact. And that's where things get dangerous, because once a story reaches that level, it's almost impossible to control how it spreads. In the middle of all this, there were also reports that people close to both sides were trying to calm things down privately. Again, nothing confirmed, but multiple sources hinted that conversations were happening behind closed doors. The idea was to prevent things from escalating into something that could have real consequences beyond the internet. But even with those efforts, the tension didn't go away. If anything, it grew stronger. Every new post, every new clip, every new reaction added fuel to the fire. Fans kept asking the same question over and over again. What exactly is in those alleged files? And why does it feel like nobody wants to say it out loud? And as the night went on, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about who said what anymore. This was about perception, about control, about who gets to shape the story that the world believes. And right now, that story was still being written in real time, with every new detail making it harder to tell where the truth ends and the narrative begins. And right where that confusion started settling in, the conversation took another sharp turn, because more voices began stepping into the situation, each one adding their own version of what might be going on. It wasn't just fans anymore. It was bloggers, smaller creators, even people who claimed they had indirect connections to the industry. Everyone suddenly had something to say, and the story kept growing in directions nobody could fully track. Akademiks went live again the next day, and this time his tone was different. Calmer, more measured, like he understood that whatever he said next was going to be clipped, reposted, and turned into headlines within minutes. He looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm telling y'all right now, don't believe everything you see, but don't ignore everything either." That line alone had people debating for hours. Fans are shocked because it felt like he was both confirming and denying at the same time, keeping the mystery alive without crossing any lines. He started breaking down how narratives get built in situations like this. One person says something, then another person repeats it. Then suddenly it's everywhere, he explained. But then he paused again and added, "But sometimes things don't spread that fast unless there's something behind it." That hesitation, that slight change in his voice, made people feel like he knew more than he was willing to say out loud. At the same time, there were subtle shifts happening around T.I.'s circle. A close associate posted a message that read, "Truth don't fear noise."
While it didn't mention anything specific, fans immediately connected it to everything that was going on. The comments were filled with people asking questions, demanding clarity, and trying to decode what it really meant. Emotions ran high as supporters defended him, while others kept pushing for answers. Then came a moment that really caught attention. A short clip started circulating where T.I. was seen in what looked like a private setting, talking to someone off camera. His tone was serious, his body language controlled but tense. He said, "People can say whatever they want, but at the end of the day, reality don't change." That was it, just one sentence, but it was enough to send the internet into another wave of speculation. Some fans took it as confidence, a sign that he wasn't worried about anything. Others saw it differently, interpreting it as someone trying to stay calm while something bigger was happening behind the scenes. The family was left divided in terms of how to handle the growing pressure. Some believed addressing it head-on would only make things worse, while others felt that staying silent was allowing the narrative to grow unchecked. Meanwhile, 50 Cent continued to operate in a way that kept everyone guessing.
Instead of engaging directly, he leaned into his usual style, posting content that could be interpreted in multiple ways. One post showed him laughing with a caption that read, "Everybody got a story, just make sure yours is the right one." It didn't mention anyone, but the timing made it impossible to ignore. Fans are shocked at how calculated everything feels, like every move is part of a larger plan. Behind the scenes, according to what several online sources are claiming, conversations were getting more intense. People close to the situation were reportedly trying to figure out how far things could go if these rumors kept spreading. One anonymous source told a page, "This ain't just about clout. There are real reputations involved." Again, nothing confirmed, but the consistency of these reports made them hard to dismiss completely. Akademiks returned to the topic once more, and this time he focused on the bigger picture. "Y'all gotta understand," he said, "in 2026, perception is everything. Once people start believing something, it don't even matter if it's true or not." That statement hit hard because it reflected exactly what was happening in real time. The narrative was taking on a life of its own, growing beyond the control of anyone directly involved. He also pointed out how quickly fans switch sides. "Yesterday y'all were praising, today y'all questioning," he added, shaking his head. That observation sparked another wave of discussion, with people debating whether loyalty still exists in a space where everything moves so fast. Emotions ran high as arguments broke out across platforms, with each side trying to defend their perspective. At the same time, there were whispers about what these alleged files could even contain. Some claimed it might be old footage being reframed. Others believed it could involve testimonials or behind-the-scenes moments that were never meant to be public. The lack of clarity made everything more intense because people were filling in the gaps with their own assumptions. One particular rumor started gaining traction, suggesting that if anything substantial were to come out, it wouldn't be dropped all at once. Instead, it would be released in pieces, building tension and keeping the conversation alive for as long as possible. Fans are shocked at how believable that sounds, especially considering how these situations have played out in the past. T.I.'s camp, on the other hand, appeared to be focusing on maintaining control of the narrative in their own way. There were more interviews, more appearances, and subtle messaging that emphasized strength and resilience. One line that stood out came from a radio interview where he said, "You can't let other people write your story for you." Again, no direct references, but the timing made it feel connected. The pressure continued to build as more people started paying attention. Even those who weren't originally interested in the situation found themselves drawn in by the constant updates in the sense that something bigger was unfolding. The story had moved beyond its original scope, becoming a full-blown spectacle that everyone was watching in real time. Akademiks summed it up in one of his streams by saying, "This is how things get out of control, not because of one thing, but because of everything happening at once." And that's exactly what it felt like. Multiple narratives, multiple perspectives, all colliding and creating a situation that was becoming harder to understand with each passing hour. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any more intense, another layer started to form, one that shifted the focus from speculation to something that felt a lot more personal and a lot more
unpredictable. And that shift didn't come from a loud post or a viral clip. It came from a series of small moments that, when put together, started to feel way more serious than anything before. People began noticing how certain conversations were being handled differently, how some voices suddenly went quiet, while others became more careful with their words. It wasn't chaos anymore. It felt controlled, and that made fans even more uneasy. Akademiks picked up on that energy almost immediately. During one of his late-night streams, he leaned forward and said, "Y'all see it too, right? Everybody's moving different now." His chat exploded. People typing fast, agreeing, disagreeing, throwing theories back and forth. He didn't confirm anything, but he started breaking down the pattern. "When things get quiet like this," he said, "that's usually when something is actually happening behind the scenes." That statement alone pushed the conversation into a whole new direction. Fans are shocked because the tone had changed from entertainment to something that felt closer to real consequences. The jokes slowed down, the memes weren't hitting the same, and people started asking more serious questions about what this could mean long term. At the center of it all, the idea of these alleged files kept growing, not because anyone had actually seen them, but because the way people were talking about them made it feel like they existed somewhere, waiting. Some bloggers began claiming that conversations were happening about legal boundaries, about what could or couldn't be shown if something like this ever became public. Again, nothing confirmed, but the consistency of those claims made them hard to ignore.
One moment that really stood out came when a well-known media personality, without naming anyone, said on a podcast, "There's a line between content and consequences, and not everybody knows where that line is until it's too late." Fans immediately connected that statement to everything going on. Emotions ran high as people debated whether this was a warning or just a general observation about the industry. On the other side, T.I. appeared more focused but also more guarded. In a short interview clip that started circulating, he spoke about legacy in a way that felt different from before. "Your name is everything," he said, "and once people start playing with that, you gotta decide how you respond." It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive, but it carried weight, the kind of statement that makes people stop and think. The family was left divided once again, not in terms of loyalty, but in strategy. Some felt like the situation was being blown out of proportion and would pass if ignored. Others believed that even rumors, if left unchecked, could turn into something permanent. That tension was visible in small ways, in posts, in interviews, in the way people chose their words carefully instead of speaking freely. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's presence remained consistent but unpredictable. He didn't need to say much because at this point the conversation was already moving on its own. Still, he managed to keep himself at the center of it with subtle moves. One day it was a post that seemed completely unrelated. The next day it was a comment that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Fans are shocked at how effective that approach is because it keeps the spotlight without ever fully stepping into it. Akademiks addressed that directly. "That's the game," he said. "You don't always gotta say something direct. Sometimes you just let people fill in the blanks." And that's exactly what was happening. The blanks were being filled by thousands of voices, each one adding their own version of the story, making it bigger, louder, and more complicated. At the same time, there were growing discussions about how far this could go. Some people started asking whether this was still just about perception, or if it could lead to something more serious. Others questioned whether the entire situation was being misunderstood, whether it was actually a strategy playing out exactly as intended. The uncertainty kept everyone locked in because there was no clear answer. One rumor that gained attention suggested that if anything were to come out, it wouldn't be presented as a direct attack, but as something framed in a way that allowed people to draw their own conclusions. That idea alone made the situation feel even more intense because it meant the narrative could shift without a single direct accusation being made. Akademiks touched on that during another stream. Sometimes the most powerful move, he said, is not telling people what to think, it's giving them something to think about. That line stuck with a lot of viewers because it explained exactly why the situation felt so different from a typical back and forth. Fans are shocked at how invested they've become in something that, on paper, hasn't even been confirmed. But that's the reality of how
These stories work now. Once the conversation reaches a certain level, it becomes bigger than facts, bigger than proof. It becomes about perception, about what people believe, and how quickly those beliefs spread. On T.I.'s side, there was a noticeable effort to shift the focus back to his work, his music, his message. Appearances increased, conversations expanded, and there was a clear attempt to remind people of everything he had built over the years. But even Matt became part of the discussion, with some fans questioning whether it was a natural move or a response to the growing noise. The tension between control and reaction became the defining element of the situation. Every move, every word, every silence was being analyzed, interpreted, and debated. Emotions ran high as supporters on both sides tried to make sense of what was happening, often reaching completely different conclusions. And through it all, the idea of those alleged files never left the conversation. It stayed there, in the background, shaping how everything else was perceived. Because whether they existed or not, the belief that they might was enough to change how people viewed the entire situation. As the days passed, one thing became clear. This wasn't something that would just fade away. It had reached a point where every new development, no matter how small, had the potential to shift the entire narrative. And with so many eyes watching, waiting, and reacting, the pressure kept building in a way that felt impossible to ignore. And as that pressure kept building, the entire situation started to feel like it was balancing on a thin line, one small moment of life from tipping into something nobody could control. What made it even more intense was the silence between the noise. Not the loud reactions, not the viral clips, but those gaps where nothing was said and everything was being watched. Akademiks pointed that out in a stream that quickly went viral. He paused mid-sentence, looked straight at the chat, and said, "Y'all ever notice how sometimes the loudest thing is what people don't say?" That line hit different. Fans were shocked because it captured exactly what everyone was feeling but couldn't fully explain. The situation wasn't just about what was being shared anymore. It was about what was being held back.
He started breaking down how these narratives evolve. First it's rumors, then it's discussions, then it's expectations, he said. And once people start expecting something, it almost don't matter if it shows up or not. That idea alone changed how a lot of people were looking at the situation. It wasn't just about whether these alleged files existed. It was about how the belief in them was already shaping the story. At the same time, the conversation around legacy became louder. People began asking what all of this could mean long-term, not just for the individuals involved, but for how stories like this play out in the public eye. One commentator said, "We're watching how narratives are built in real time," and that statement quickly spread across platforms, becoming part of the discussion itself. T.I. continued to carry himself with a certain level of control, but there were moments where the weight of everything seemed visible. In one appearance, he spoke about resilience in a way that felt personal. "You can't let noise define you," he said, "because noise don't last, but your name does." Fans immediately reacted to that line, some seeing it as strength, others reading it as someone pushing through a situation that was still unfolding. The family was left divided, not in loyalty, but in how much to engage with what was happening. Some members appeared more vocal, subtly defending and reinforcing a sense of unity, while others chose to stay quiet, letting the situation play out without adding to the conversation. That contrast created its own kind of tension, one that fans picked up on quickly. On the other side, 50 Cent maintained his position in a way that kept everyone guessing. He didn't step into direct confrontation, but he never stepped away either. His presence was constant, calculated, and just visible enough to keep people talking. One of his posts simply read, "Time always tells the story," and that was enough to reignite debates all over again. Fans were shocked at how a single line can carry so much weight when placed at the right moment. Akademiks returned once more to break everything down, and this time his focus was on how the audience itself was shaping the outcome. "Y'all part of this too," he said. "The way you react, the way you share, that's what makes it bigger." It was a reminder that this wasn't just happening between a few people, it was being amplified by millions of voices all reacting in real time. He also touched on something that hadn't been discussed as much before, the idea that not every story needs a clear ending. Sometimes, he said, things just evolve into something else, and you don't
even realize when it changed. That perspective added another layer to the situation, suggesting that what people were watching might not have a single defining moment, but rather a series of shifts that slowly reshaped everything. Fans are shocked at how invested they've become in something that still sits in the space between rumor and reality, but that's exactly what makes it so powerful. The uncertainty keeps people engaged, the unanswered questions keep the conversation alive, and every new detail, no matter how small, feels like it could be the one that changes everything. As more time passed, the focus began to shift slightly from what might happen to what was already happening. Reputations were being discussed, narratives were being formed, and the story was continuing to grow whether anyone wanted it to or not. Emotions ran high as supporters held their ground, critics raised new questions, and neutral observers tried to make sense of it all. And through it all, one thing remained constant, the idea that something bigger could still be around the corner. Whether that meant actual revelations or simply more layers of speculation, nobody could say for sure, but the feeling was there, and it wasn't going away. Akademiks summed it up in a way that stuck with a lot of people. "This ain't just about what's true or what's not," he said. "It's about what people believe, and once that gets locked in, everything else moves around it." That line captured the entire situation perfectly, because at this point, the belief itself had become the story. The tension, the silence, the reactions, all of it combined into something that felt bigger than a single moment or a single claim. It felt like a turning point, not necessarily because of what had been proven, but because of how the conversation had evolved. And as the timeline kept moving, as new voices joined and old ones stepped back, one question continued to hang in the air, louder than anything else. What happens if the story people are already believing starts to feel real enough that it no longer needs proof? And now the situation stands at a point where nobody can say for sure what happens next, but everyone is watching like something major is just around the corner. What started as reports, speculation, and commentary has now turned into a full-blown conversation that refuses to slow down. Fans are shocked at how quickly everything escalated, and even now, new angles keep popping up that make the story far from over. Some people believe this is all just perception, a narrative that grew too fast and too strong. Others are convinced there is more behind the scenes that hasn't come out yet. And that's what makes this whole situation so intense, because you are left trying to decide what to believe while the story keeps evolving in real time. Emotions ran high, opinions are split, and the entire community feels divided on what this really means. Is this just another example of how powerful media and storytelling can be? Or is there actually something bigger waiting to surface? Is this a calculated move, or a situation that got out of control? And most importantly,
How does this end, if it even ends at all? Now I want to hear from you. What do you think is really going on here? Do you believe these reports hold any weight, or is this all just hype building around a bigger narrative? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those situations where every opinion adds another layer to the story. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into stories like this, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Because trust me, if anything new drops in this situation, you already know we're going to be right here breaking it down for you. And stay locked in, because in a story like this, the next update could change everything.